Black chef turned away but returns with dishes, astounds the restaurant critics. The restaurant door closed with a finality that echoed in Marcus Washington's ears like a gunshot. The head chef of Lumiere, widely regarded as Chicago's most prestigious restaurant, had just looked him straight in the eye and said, "We're not interested in your style of cooking here." Marcus stood motionless on the sidewalk, his portfolio of innovative recipes clutched in his trembling hands, the words "your style" hanging in the air between what was said and what was meant. Through the glass door, he could see the white-jacketed staff preparing for the evening service, moving with the practiced precision that came from years of classical French training that Marcus had also received at the Culinary Institute of America, graduating at the top of his class just 3 years ago. But none of that had mattered when Chef Pascal Dubois had seen his face. "You have two choices now," Marcus whispered to himself, his breath forming small clouds in the chilly October air. "You can walk away and let them win, or you can prove them wrong in a way they'll never forget." A food critic for the Chicago Tribune passed by, nodding politely as he recognized Marcus from a pop-up dinner event last month. The critic didn't break stride as he entered Lumiere, where he would join 4 other influential reviewers for a special tasting menu, a menu that would determine whether Lumiere would receive its coveted 3rd Michelin star. Marcus watched the critic disappear inside, a plan forming in his mind. He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Zoe, I need your help and your kitchen, right now." 2 hours later, Marcus stood in his best friend's restaurant kitchen, surrounded by a hurricane of activity. 6 dishes sat before him, each one telling a story, his story. Each plate represented a chapter of his culinary journey, from his grandmother's South Carolina roots to his training in France to his own unique fusion of techniques and flavors that honored both traditions. "Are you sure about this?" Zoe asked, wiping her hands on her apron. Her restaurant wasn't open on Mondays, giving them the privacy they needed. Marcus looked down at the final dish, a reinvention of his grandmother's peach cobbler, transformed into an elegant dessert that maintained the soul of the original while elevating it to fine dining status. "Those critics came to taste the future of cuisine," he said, carefully placing each dish in a specialized container designed to maintain temperature and presentation. "They just don't know that the future looks like me." Inside Lumiere, the 5 critics were midway through their 7-course meal, making notes and exchanging hushed observations. The restaurant's maitre d' approached their table with a concerned expression. "Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, there's someone at the door insisting on speaking with you. Normally we would never interrupt, but he's brought food and says it's urgent that you taste it." The critics exchanged glances. This was unprecedented. "Who is it?" asked Elaine Porter, the most influential of the group. "Chef named Marcus Washington." Recognition flickered across their faces. Several had heard of his pop-ups, one had even attended. "Bring him in," Elaine decided. "This is unusual enough to be interesting." Minutes later, Marcus stood before them, Zoe by his side. The restaurant had gone quiet, staff and diners alike watching the drama unfold. "2 hours ago, I was turned away from this kitchen," Marcus said, his voice steady. "Not because of my skills or my vision, but because of who I am. I've brought 6 dishes that tell my story, the story that Chef Dubois refused to hear. All I ask is that you taste them." Chef Dubois emerged from the kitchen, his face flushed with anger. "This is an outrage. You cannot simply, 'We will taste them,'" Elaine interrupted, her gaze fixed on Marcus. "After all, we're here to evaluate the best cuisine in Chicago. It would be remiss of us not to consider all possibilities." As Marcus and Zoe carefully arranged the dishes before the critics, Pascal Dubois watched from the sidelines, his expression unreadable. The restaurant held its collective breath as the first fork was lifted to the first mouth, and the critics began to experience the food that would change everything. In that moment, standing in the silent restaurant with his heart pounding in his chest, Marcus knew that regardless of what happened next, he had already won. He had refused to be silenced. He had chosen to be seen. The oldest critic closed his eyes as he tasted the first dish, and a single tear traced its way down his weathered cheek. The evening was just beginning. 3 years earlier, Marcus Washington stood in the gleaming kitchen of the Culinary Institute of America, his chef's whites crisp and spotless as he presented his final exam dish to the panel of instructors. The plate before him showcased a perfect duck breast, the skin rendered to golden crispness, served with a cherry gastrique that paid homage to the classical French techniques he'd mastered while incorporating subtle flavors from his southern upbringing. "Exceptional balance, Washington," said Chef Laros, the notoriously difficult head instructor who rarely offered praise. Your technical skills are impeccable, but it's your ability to honor tradition while finding your own voice that sets you apart. Marcus beamed with pride. That moment represented everything he'd worked for since he was 8 years old, standing on a stool in his grandmother's kitchen in Charleston, South Carolina, learning to make the perfect biscuit. Grandma Rose had recognized his passion early and nurtured it, saving every spare dollar to buy him proper knives when he turned 16. "You're going to change the way people think about food, Marcus," she'd told him. "You just remember where you came from and you'll know where to go." After graduation, Marcus had apprenticed at a 2-star Michelin restaurant in New York, working 18-hour days, earning the respect of each station chef through sheer determination and talent. He'd moved up quickly, eventually becoming Sue's chef, but something was missing. He couldn't fully express his culinary voice in someone else's kitchen. So he'd returned to Chicago, his adopted hometown, and launched a series of pop-up dinner events showcasing his unique vision. A harmonious fusion of French technique, Southern soul, and global influences that reflected America's diverse culinary heritage. The events had sold out instantly, word spreading through the city's foodie community about this innovative young chef. That success had led him to Lumiere's door, portfolio in hand, ready to apply for the newly vacant Sue's chef position. A position that would give him the platform and resources to further develop his vision while learning from one of the city's most celebrated chefs, until the door had closed in his face. In Zoe Chen's modest but immaculate kitchen, Marcus worked with focused intensity, his hands moving with practiced precision as he prepared the 6 dishes that would represent his culinary journey. "You should have seen his face, Zoe," Marcus said, carefully placing edible flowers on a delicate crab cake infused with ginger and Cajun spices. "He didn't even look at my portfolio, just saw me and decided." Zoe, who had been Marcus's classmate at culinary school before opening her own successful Asian fusion restaurant, shook her head. "It's his loss, but are you sure this is the right way to handle it? Crashing their critic dinner is pretty bold." Marcus paused, considering her question. "Maybe not, but I'm tired of playing by rules that were designed to keep people like me out of kitchens like that. Sometimes you have to create your own opportunity." He moved on to the 3rd dish, a reinvention of his grandmother's gumbo, transformed into a refined consommé that carried all the depth and complexity of the original, but with a clarity and presentation worthy of fine dining. "Besides," he continued, "those critics came to taste the future of cuisine in Chicago. I'm just making sure they don't miss it." Zoe smiled, helping him plate the consommé. "Well, when you put it that way, we're doing them a favor." As they worked, Marcus reflected on the path that had led him here. His grandmother had passed away during his 2nd year at culinary school, never getting to see him graduate. Her final words to him had been, "Don't let anyone tell you where you belong, child. You belong wherever your heart and your talent take you." Tonight, those words fueled him as he prepared to challenge not just Chef Dubois, but an entire system that too often judged chefs by their appearance rather than their abilities. Back at Lumiere, the 5 critics sat in stunned silence as they tasted Marcus's first dish, a play on shrimp and grits that transformed the humble Southern staple into an elegant appetizer. The grits had been shaped into a delicate quenelle, enriched with aged white cheddar and topped with perfectly seared Gulf shrimp and a subtle Espelette pepper sauce. "This is," Richard Braxton, the Tribune critic, struggled to find words. "This is simultaneously familiar and completely new." Elaine Porter nodded, making notes. "The balance is impeccable. There's reverence for the original dish, but he's elevated it without losing its soul." At a nearby table, Pascal Dubois watched with a stony expression as the critics moved on to Marcus's 2nd offering, the crab cake with ginger and Cajun spices, served with a microgreen salad and citrus vinaigrette. The dish represented Marcus's exploration of the historical connections between Cajun and Asian cuisines, both born from necessity and ingenuity. "The spice blend is remarkable," said Sophia Lee, the youngest critic, who wrote for an influential online publication. "It's like he's revealing connections that were always there, just waiting to be discovered." As the critics continued through Marcus's carefully crafted progression of dishes, the other diners in the restaurant began to take notice, whispering among themselves, smartphones discreetly capturing the unusual scene. By the 4th dish, a sous vide lamb loin with a coffee and chicory crust, served with sweet potato puree and collard greens prepared with classical French technique, even the most reserved critic was openly expressing admiration. Marcus stood at the edge of the dining room, watching their reactions, his heart pounding. This moment represented everything he'd worked for everything his grandmother had believed he could achieve. He felt her presence beside him, giving him strength. Chef Dubois approached, his expression unreadable. "You had no right to interrupt this dinner," he said quietly so only Marcus could hear. "You had no right to judge me without tasting my food," Marcus replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "But here we are." 3 months before this night, Marcus had been gaining recognition throughout Chicago's culinary scene. His pop-up events had attracted the attention of local food media, and he'd been featured in a prominent article titled "Rising Stars Reshaping Chicago Dining." The photo accompanying the piece showed him in mid-action in the kitchen, focused and confident. That article had caught the eye of James Porter, husband of critic Elaine Porter, who had attended one of Marcus's events without revealing his connection to the influential critic. "My wife needs to taste your food," he had told Marcus afterward, handing him a business card. "She's always looking for new voices in the culinary world." Marcus had been elated, knowing that Elaine Porter's approval could change the trajectory of his career. He'd been preparing to contact her when he'd heard about the Sous Chef opening at Lumiere. The timing had seemed perfect, a chance to work in a prestigious kitchen while continuing to develop his own voice. Now, standing in Lumiere under very different circumstances than he had imagined, Marcus caught Elaine's eye. She gave him a small nod, and he realized that James must have told her about his experience at the pop-up. Perhaps that was why she had agreed to taste his food tonight. As the critics moved on to his fifth dish, a deconstructed beef bourguignon that honored the French classic while incorporating elements of Southern braising techniques, Marcus noticed other chefs from the kitchen peering out from behind the swinging doors, their curiosity overcoming their loyalty to Chef Dubois. One of them, a young woman with determined eyes, gave Marcus a subtle thumbs up. In that moment, he realized that this evening wasn't just about his own journey. It was about opening doors for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. Zoe stood beside Marcus, quietly providing support as the critics tasted each dish. She had been with him through every step of his culinary journey, from late-night study sessions at culinary school to the grueling apprenticeship in New York to the launch of his pop-up series in Chicago. "They're loving it," she whispered, squeezing his arm. "Just look at their faces." Indeed, the critics were engaged in animated discussion, comparing notes and returning to taste elements of earlier dishes for comparison. Their expressions reflected not just appreciation, but discovery, that rare moment when experienced palates encounter something truly new. At a nearby table, a young black woman dining with friends watched the scene with intense interest. She caught Marcus's eye and mouthed, "Thank you." He nodded in acknowledgement, understanding the weight of representation, the importance of being visible in spaces where people like them had historically been excluded. The final dish was being served now. His grandmother's peach cobbler, reimagined as a sophisticated dessert with peaches prepared 3 ways, served with bourbon vanilla ice cream and a delicate tuile cookie imprinted with a pattern reminiscent of the quilt his grandmother had kept on her couch. "This dish is dedicated to my grandmother, Rose Washington," Marcus explained as the plates were set before the critics. "She taught me that food is more than sustenance. It's a way to preserve history, to tell stories, to bring people together across differences. Everything I create is built on the foundation she gave me." Elaine Porter took a bite and closed her eyes, allowing the flavors to transport her. When she opened them again, they shone with emotion. "I can taste the love in this dish," she said simply. "And that, more than any technique, is what makes a chef truly great." Chef Dubois, who had been watching silently, turned and walked back to the kitchen, his shoulders rigid. The other diners in the restaurant, who had been witnessing this unprecedented event, burst into spontaneous applause. Marcus nodded in acknowledgement, overwhelmed by the moment but standing tall. In the kitchen, the young female chef who had given Marcus the thumbs up made a decision. She removed her chef's jacket, folded it neatly, and placed it on the counter. Then she walked out into the dining room and approached Marcus. "I'm Vanessa," she said, extending her hand, "and I want to learn from you, not him." If you're connecting with Marcus's journey of perseverance and authenticity, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that challenge perspectives and celebrate the human spirit. The next morning, Marcus awoke to his phone buzzing incessantly. Bleary-eyed, he checked the screen to find dozens of notifications, messages, emails, social media alerts, all responding to something he hadn't yet seen. He opened his browser to find Elaine Porter's review had already been published online, breaking the Tribune's usual schedule. The headline read, "The future of Chicago cuisine arrived through the front door." Last night, I experienced the most extraordinary culinary moment of my 20-year career as a food critic, the article began. It wasn't part of the planned tasting menu at Lumiere, where I and 4 colleagues had gathered to evaluate the restaurant's bid for a third Michelin star. Instead, it arrived unexpectedly in the form of 6 dishes prepared by Chef Marcus Washington, who had been turned away from Lumiere's kitchen earlier that same day. The review went on to describe each dish in detail, praising not just Marcus's technical skills, but his unique culinary voice and ability to create meaningful connections through food. In a single hour, Chef Washington demonstrated more innovation, heart, and understanding of what makes cuisine truly exceptional than many established chefs achieve in a lifetime. His food tells a story of heritage honored, of boundaries crossed, of traditions both respected and reimagined. The final paragraph delivered a stunning conclusion. While Lumiere's cuisine remains technically impressive, it suddenly feels outdated, a relic of a culinary world that is rapidly changing. Chef Washington represents the future, inclusive, innovative, and deeply personal. If Chicago wants to remain relevant in the global culinary conversation, it would do well to make space for voices like his. As for Lumiere's third star, I find myself unable to recommend it knowing that true brilliance was turned away at its door. Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, overwhelmed. His phone rang, Zoe calling. "Have you seen it?" she asked without preamble. "I'm reading it now," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I can't believe she wrote this." "It's not just Elaine," Zoe said excitedly. "All 5 critics have published reviews. You're trending on social media. People are sharing stories about being rejected because of who they are. You've started something, Marcus." As the impact of the night's events began to sink in, Marcus received another call from James Porter. "Marcus, it's James. Elaine wanted me to call you. We have investors who have been looking for a chef with a unique vision to back. After last night, they're convinced that chef is you. They want to meet to discuss funding your own restaurant." Marcus sat in stunned silence, thinking of his grandmother and how proud she would be. From her humble kitchen in Charleston to potentially having his own restaurant in Chicago, it was everything he had dreamed of and more. "There's one more thing," James continued. "Vanessa isn't the only one who left Lumiere last night. 3 other staff members walked out too. They're all asking if they can work with you." 2 weeks later, Marcus sat in a sleek conference room in downtown Chicago, reviewing architectural plans for his new restaurant. The investors had moved with unprecedented speed, eager to capitalize on the publicity generated by the critics' reviews and the social media storm that had followed. "We're thinking this space in the West Loop," said Elaine Porter, who had taken a personal interest in the project. "It's the former site of Harvest, which closed last month. The bones are good and the location is perfect." Marcus studied the plans, envisioning the possibilities. "I'd want to open up the kitchen," he said, pointing to the layout. "Make it visible from the dining room. I want guests to see the diversity of the team, to understand that great cuisine comes from many different hands and traditions." Elaine nodded approvingly. "Transparency in all things, I like it." The meeting was interrupted by Marcus's phone buzzing with a text from Zoe. "Turn on WGN now." Curious, Marcus asked if they could pause for a moment. Someone switched on the television mounted on the conference room wall, tuning to the local station. On screen was Chef Pascal Dubois, looking uncomfortable as he addressed a reporter. "Deeply regret the incident and my actions," he was saying, his French accent more pronounced under stress. "Lumiere has always strived for excellence, and in turning away Chef Washington, I failed to uphold that standard. My personal biases affected my professional judgment, and for that I am truly sorry." The reporter pressed him. "Will you be making changes to your hiring practices?" Pascal nodded stiffly. "We are implementing new protocols to ensure our hiring is based solely on talent and ability. Additionally, we will be launching a mentorship program for young chefs from underrepresented backgrounds." Marcus watched silently, his expression thoughtful. The apology seemed rehearsed, likely crafted by a PR team in response to the backlash Lumiere had received. Yet there was something in Pascal's eyes, a glimmer of genuine regret, perhaps even understanding. "What do you think?" asked one of the investors as they turned off the television. Marcus considered the question carefully. "I think change happens in many ways," he said finally. "Sometimes through confrontation, sometimes through conversation. What matters is that it happens." He turned back to the restaurant plans with renewed focus. "Now about the menu concept." As winter settled over Chicago, Marcus's vision began to take physical form. The former harvest space was being transformed according to his specifications, with a large open kitchen as its centerpiece. The restaurant would be called Rose, in honor of his grandmother. In the temporary test kitchen he'd established in a rented space, Marcus worked with his growing team to develop the opening menu. Vanessa had proven to be an exceptional sous chef, her classical training complementing Marcus's innovative approach. The three other staff who had left Lumiere had brought valuable skills and perspectives as well. "Try this version," Marcus said, offering Vanessa a spoon of the gumbo consommé he'd served the critics, now refined further. "I've adjusted the stock reduction time and added more filet powder at the end." Vanessa tasted it thoughtfully. "It's clearer but still has all the depth. Perfect." Their working relationship had quickly evolved into a true collaboration, each pushing the other to greater creativity and precision. As they worked, a delivery arrived, a package addressed to Marcus. Inside was a vintage cookbook, Mastering the Art of French Cooking by Julia Child, first edition. A note accompanied it. "Chef Washington, your grandmother taught you that food tells stories and brings people together. My grandmother taught me the same, though I've sometimes forgotten this essential truth. This book changed American cuisine by making French techniques accessible to home cooks. Perhaps your cooking will create a similar bridge. I look forward to tasting what you create at Rose." Pascal Dubois. Marcus stared at the book, running his fingers over its worn cover. The gesture was unexpected, a private acknowledgement rather than a public performance. "Is that from who I think it is?" Vanessa asked, reading over his shoulder. Marcus nodded. "People can surprise you." "Are you going to respond?" Marcus considered the question. "Yes," he said finally. "I think I will." If this story of reconciliation and the power of staying true to your vision resonates with you, please subscribe to continue following stories that explore the complexities of human relationships and the courage to stand for what you believe in. The night before Rose's grand opening, Marcus invited a special group for a private dinner service. His original team including Zoe and Vanessa, the 5 critics who had changed his life, James Porter, and his culinary school mentors. One place remained empty for his grandmother, whose spirit infused every aspect of the restaurant. The space was stunning warm wood tones balanced with modern elements, walls adorned with works by local black artists, and the open kitchen serving as the heart of the restaurant. Each table featured a small quilted coaster, handmade by a cooperative of women in South Carolina, including some who had known his grandmother. "Before we serve the first course," Marcus said, standing before the gathered guests, "I want to thank each of you for being part of this journey. What happened at Lumiere was just one moment, but it was a moment that revealed both a problem and a possibility." He gestured toward the kitchen, where his diverse team was visible, preparing the evening's dishes with focused precision. "The possibility is this: a kitchen where everyone belongs, where different traditions and perspectives create something greater than any one person could imagine alone. This is the future of American cuisine, not just French or Southern or Asian or anything else, but all of these voices in harmony, respecting each other and creating together." Elaine Porter raised her glass. To Rose, both the woman and the restaurant she inspired. As the first course was about to be served, the front door opened and Pascal Dubois entered looking uncertain. A hush fell over the room. Marcus approached him. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I almost didn't," Pascal admitted, "but your invitation said a night of healing through food. And I think perhaps I need that as much as anyone." Marcus nodded. "There's a place for you at the table." That night, as dish after dish emerged from Rose's kitchen, conversations flowed, bridges were built, and wounds began to heal. Not through forgetting what had happened, but through acknowledging it and choosing to move forward. The final course was a surprise not on the printed menu. Servers brought out small plates with 2 bites on each, a perfect, classic French madeleine paired with a miniature Southern biscuit. 2 traditions, Marcus explained, each perfect in its own way, each with its own history and meaning. Different but sitting on the same plate in harmony. This is my vision, not just for food, but for all of us. 6 months later, Rose had become the most sought-after reservation in Chicago. National publications had featured Marcus and his innovative approach to cuisine. The James Beard Foundation had taken notice. And most importantly, the restaurant had become a place where young chefs from all backgrounds could see a future for themselves in fine dining. On a quiet Monday when the restaurant was closed, Marcus sat at the bar reviewing the previous week's operations with Vanessa. "The new summer menu is getting incredible feedback," she reported. "Especially the chilled peach soup with crab and corn." Marcus nodded, pleased. "And the apprenticeship program? We have 20 applications for the next cohort. Word is spreading. The apprenticeship program had been Marcus's way of addressing the systemic issues in the culinary world, providing paid training and mentorship to talented young people who might otherwise struggle to access classical culinary education. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Marcus went to answer it, finding a young black woman in her early 20s standing outside. "We're closed today," he began. "I know," she said. "I'm not here as a customer. My name is Desiree Johnson. I'm a culinary student, and I've been following your story since that night at Lumiere." Marcus invited her in, curious. "I almost quit school last year," Desiree explained as they sat at the bar. "I was the only black woman in my class, and my instructor kept saying my flavors were too bold and unrefined. But then I read about what you did, how you refused to be turned away, how you made them see you." She placed a portfolio on the bar, similar to the one Marcus had brought to Lumiere that fateful day. "I have 2 months left before graduation, and I want to apply for your apprenticeship program. Your story showed me that I belong in this industry too, that my voice matters." Marcus felt a wave of emotion as he recognized his own journey in hers. This was the true measure of success, not the reviews or awards, but the doors opened for those who would come after him. "Let's take a look at your work," he said, opening her portfolio. "And then, if you have time, I'd like to show you around the kitchen." As they walked through Rose's kitchen later, Marcus pointed out the small shrine he'd created in one corner, a framed photo of his grandmother surrounded by her favorite cooking implements. "She never got to see any of this," he told Desiree. "But she's the reason it exists. She taught me that food is love made visible." Desiree nodded in understanding. "My grandfather was like that. He could make a feast from almost nothing, and everyone in the neighborhood would come to our backyard on Sundays." "That's the tradition we're preserving here," Marcus said. "Not just French techniques or Southern flavors, but that fundamental understanding that when we cook for others, we're giving part of ourselves." As they continued the tour, Marcus felt a sense of completion. The circle that had begun in his grandmother's kitchen was expanding, including new voices, new stories, new traditions. Rose wasn't just a restaurant. It was a continuation of his grandmother's legacy of love, transformed but unbroken. And in the busy kitchen of Rose, where chefs from diverse backgrounds worked side by side creating food that honored their collective histories while pioneering new possibilities, the spirit of Grandma Rose lived on, in every dish served, every apprentice trained, every barrier broken. Marcus Washington had not only found his place in the culinary world, he had expanded it for others. And that, even more than the perfect plate, was his greatest creation. Thank you for joining us for this story of perseverance, identity, and the transformative power of food. If you found meaning in Marcus's journey, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. What barriers have you overcome in your own life? How has food connected you to your heritage or brought you closer to understanding others? Your stories matter to our community, and we look forward to exploring more narratives that challenge, inspire, and unite us in future videos.